Thank you. Well, this week's Torah portion is Vayeshev, which means he continued living. This is Parsha 9 out of 54 that we're going through here. And it starts in Genesis chapter 37 and verse 1. I hope you guys had time to read it throughout your week and be thinking about and praying about different insights on this Torah portion. I've had a really busy week, and I've been administering finals to all of my students this week. So I'm going to admit that I don't have a super fancy slideshow today, but we're gonna pray that the Lord continues to reveal His Word and the treasures found within it, regardless of whatever kind of fancy slideshow. Sometimes that can almost be more of a distraction than anything else. But we're just going to start in Genesis 37. We're going to read through, and today we're going to talk about America's least favorite subject. What is that? Least favorite subject? Math. You're close. Okay, math. Our least.
I like that.
Math, yeah.
I like that answer. I like that. That's funny.
No, but in all seriousness, our least favorite suffering as Americans is suffering, and we hate suffering. We hate it so much. We hate being uncomfortable, don't we? And Joseph, we'll see, is a character that completely embodies and embraces suffering. And he does it really well. So verse 1. Yaakov. Oh, wait, should we go through? Okay, let's go through this real fast. Cholam. Cholam is a dream. Then this is the first time we see this town, this city, Dotan. Dotan it could have a couple different meanings, the place of two wells or the place of a law. We don't really know fully if it's one or the other or if it's perhaps both of those meanings. Then we have Yosef right here. Yosef means to supplant or to add onto. And then we have this, Ketonet Pasim. Ketonet Pasim. Does anyone want to take a guess what that is? Good, nobody knows. All right, that's exciting. Let's keep going. This is an outline, Joseph's dreams of greatness. Then we have Joseph is sold by his brothers, Judah and Tamar debacle that goes on, Joseph and Potiphar's wife. We're all familiar with these stories a little bit. And then dreams of two prisoners are interpreted, right? Let's go to Genesis chapter. I'm going to skip that. Genesis chapter 37, starting in verse 1. I'm going to read through and just add some commentary. Follow along with me if you have the Bible with you. Yaakov continued living in the land where his father had lived as a foreigner, the land of Canaan. And here's the Toldot, the history of Yaakov. When Yosef was 17 years old, he used to pasture the flock with his brothers, even though he was still just a boy. Once, when he was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, he brought a report of Ra'ah, a report of evil about them to their father. Now Israel, he loved Yosef the most of all his children because he was the son of his old age. We think he's around 91 years old when he gives birth to, when he has Yosef. And he made him a Katonet Pasim. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they began to hate him and reached the point where they couldn't even talk with him in a civil way. Now, this reminds me a lot about the typology of Yosef is that he's a type. He's a foreshadow of who? Yeshua. Now, if you go to Israel today, especially if you go into an Orthodox community in Israel today, they're not going to call him Yeshua, which in the Hebrew language means salvation. They would call him what? Does anyone know? Yeshu. Why do they take the ah part off? It's a disrespect. They don't want to call him salvation. They call him Yeshu, which is actually, they say it's an acronym for, in the Hebrew, may his name be blotted out. May his name be forgotten. So even in Israel today, amongst Yeshua's own brothers, they cannot speak about him in a civil way. They have to disrespect him, not even really knowing who he is in his full mission. They call him Yeshu. May his name be blotted out.
They don't really even recognize him.
Yeah.
They don't realize that he is their elder brother. They don't see him in his Jewish context. They see him as Catholic Jesus, pagan Egyptian.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we're going to talk a little about it today. Now, as we read, I want you to think about all these parallels. So I'm going to give you guys a group assignment here. Yosef had a chalom, which he told his brothers, and that made him hate him all the more. And he said to them, listen, while I tell you about this dream of mine. We were tying up bundles of grain, bundles of wheat in the field, when suddenly my bundle got up by itself, and it stood upright. What does that remind you of? The resurrection. It stood upright. Then your bundles came to me and gathered around me and prostrated themselves before it. His brothers retorted, yes, you will certainly be our king. You'll do a great job of bossing us around. And they hated him still more for his dreams and for what he said. This is a foreshadow. This is a glimpse into the fact that his brothers will come prostrating themselves down, looking for grain, looking for wheat. Yes. And he had yet another dream, which he told his brothers, which he didn't put together. The first dream telling them was not a good idea, so he went and told them a second one.
A little slow there. Yeah, really.
Yeah. He says, here, I had another dream. And they're like, oh man, here we go again.
Here we go.
There was the sun, there was the moon, and the 11 stars prostrating themselves before me. Now, what is the sun and the moon a picture of?
His mother and father.
His mother and father. But we've got a problem here. Because Rachel, his mother, has been dead for years now. How is she going to bow down and prostrate herself to her son? Maybe this is talking about a future tense. Maybe this is talking about something bigger and broader, like a future resurrection. So he told his father too, as well as his brothers, but his father rebuked him. What is this chalom you have had? Do you really expect me, your mother and your king and your brothers, or your mother and your brothers to come and prostrate ourselves before you on the ground? His brothers were jealous of him. But it says his father, shamar et hadavar. Shamar, to guard the word. It says he guarded his word. Verse 12, after this, when his brothers had gone to pasture their father's sheep in Shechem, Israel asked Yosef. Why does it switch to Israel there? He says, aren't your brothers pasturing the sheep in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. And he answered, Hineni, here I am. Which has a historic phrase that goes on. This is, you can research in your own time. This is basically, what he's saying is like, I'm going on a suicide mission. He's aware of that. I'm prepared. He said to him, go now, see whether things are going well with your brothers and with the sheep, and bring word back to me. So he sent him away from the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem, which we see Shechem later is in Joshua 24, verses 32, the place where Joshua will be buried. So he's going past his future burial place, or he's going to his future burial place. And he answered, a man asks him, as he sees him wandering around the countryside, what are you looking for? He says, I'm looking for my brothers. Apparently they weren't in Shechem. And he answered, tell me, please, where are they pasturing my sheep? In other words, Joseph has lost the sheep. The father has lost his sheep. He needs someone to go regather and locate and regather his sheep. I want, if you write in your Bibles, we don't have time to look into it today, but if you write in your Bibles, if you're taking notes, write down Ezekiel 34:11 and read the rest of that chapter. Ezekiel 34:11. He needs someone to regather the sheep, to locate and gather them. Ezekiel 34:11. So the man said, his brothers, they're in Dothan. They're in Dothan. So Yosef went up to Dothan. Now, here is a map. Right here we see, this is Hebron. This is where Yosef was based out of, where we have the cave of Machpelah, right, where the tomb of his ancestors. But he goes up to Shechem, his future burial place, and he doesn't find his brothers there. So his brothers were not where they were expected to be. His brothers were not compliant, perhaps, with his father's wishes. Instead, they're farther up north in the town of Dothan. So he goes to Dothan. In verse 18, they spotted him in the distance. And before he had arrived where they were, they had already plotted to kill him. And they said to each other, look, here comes this dreamer. So come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these water cisterns over here. Then we'll say some kind of wild animal devoured him. when we'll see then what becomes of his dreams. So in other words, let's see really what becomes of his dreams. But it's interesting, the lie that they're going to use is that he gets devoured by a wild animal. And we don't have time to really jump into it, but if you go to Psalm chapter 22, Psalm chapter 22, it's very fascinating because this excuse is still being told within the broader Jewish community today. This fictitious tale about Yeshua is still being told. If you look at Psalm 22, it says in the Septuagint, which is a very predates the Masoretic, the Hebrew text, by centuries. It says they pierced my hands and my feet. But the Masoretic text has a post-Messianic, a post-Yeshua adaptation that says, like lions they surround me. In other words, the wild animals are still killing him. In other words, we still have not looked on the one we have pierced.
Wow.
So look at Psalm 22 and do a little research on that on your own. We don't have time to really jump into it today. So come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of our water cisterns. We'll see what becomes of this dreams. But when Reuben is what in the order of birth? He's the firstborn. He heard this. He saved him from being destroyed by them. Now this is interesting because by Yaakov giving him the katonet pasim, what is he saying in that gesture? That he is Noah?
He's like firstborn.
Yeah, Noah? That he's the what, Noah?
The inheritance.
That he's better than all of them.
Then he's better than all of them, and he is the new firstborn. He now has the birthright. But it's interesting, we see Reuben, in his humility, he tries to thwart their plan. But when Reuben heard this, he saved him from being destroyed by them. And he said, we shouldn't take his life. Don't shed his blood. Reuben added, throw him into the cistern over here in the wilds, but don't lay your hands on him yourselves. He intended to rescue him from them later and restore him back to his father. So it was that when Yosef arrived to be with his brothers, they stripped off his robe, his katonet pasim, the long-sleeved robe that he was wearing, and took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty, without any water in it. Now, Torah is always a picture of water. So they found an empty cistern. And the sages actually say it wasn't fully empty. It had snakes and scorpions living in it. That would be a horrible pit to be thrown into, right? And it's kind of a lesson there that if your cistern is not full of the words of Torah, if it's not full of water, it's going to be full of something. It's going to have something dwelling in it. If you're not filling up your cistern, your brain, with the words of God, then it will be filled with something. It's impossible to have a perfect vacuum in your brain, right? Then they sat down to eat their meal. But as they looked up, they saw in front of them a caravan of Ishmaelites. Now, who are the Ishmaelites descendants of?
Ishmael.
Yeah, who's Ishmael a descendant of? Who was his mother?
Abraham.
Hagar. Where's Hagar originally from?
Egypt.
Egypt. So they're going to Egypt. Their kind of motherland, if you will. Coming from Gilad with their camels loaded with aromatic gum, healing resin, and opium on their way down to Egypt. Yehuda said to his brothers, what advantage is it if we just kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites, to the Yishmaelim, instead of putting him to death with our own hands. After all, he is our brother. He's our own flesh. As if he cares, right? His brothers paid attention to him. So when the Midianim merchants passed by, they drew and lifted Yosef out of the cistern and sold him for 50 pounds of silver shekels to the Yishmaelim, who took Yosef on down to Egypt. Reuben, the firstborn, he returned to the cistern, and upon seeing that Yosef wasn't in it, he tore his clothes in mourning. He returned to his brothers and said, the boy is not here. Where can I go now? They took Yosef's robe. They killed a male goat and dipped the robe in blood. Then they sent the long sleeve, the katonet pasim, and they brought it to their father, saying, we found this. Do you know if it's your son's robe or not? And he recognized it and cried, it is my son's robe. Some wild animal has torn Yosef to pieces and eaten him. Yaakov tore his clothes, putting sackcloth around his waist, mourned his son for many days. Though all his sons and daughters tried to comfort him, he refused all consolation, saying, "No, I will not go down to the grave. I will go down to the grave to my son mourning." And his father wept for him. In Egypt, the Midianim sold Yosef to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, as a captain of the guard. Let's jump over to chapter 39. Yosef was brought down to Egypt, as we see in the map there behind me. And Potiphar, an official of Pharaoh's and captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelim who had brought him there. And Adonai was with Yosef, and he became wealthy while he was in the household of his master, the Egyptian. His master saw how Adonai was with him, and Adonai prospered everything he did. Yosef pleased him as he served him, and his master appointed him manager of the household. He entrusted all his possessions to Yosef. From the time he appointed him manager of the household and all his possessions, Adonai blessed the Egyptian's household for Yosef's sake. Adonai's blessing was on all he owned, whether in the house or in the field. So he left all his possessions in Yosef's care. And because he had him, he paid no attention to his affairs, except for the food that he ate. Now Yosef was well built and handsome as well. In time, the day came when his master's wife took a look at Yosef and said, "Sleep with me." But he refused, saying to his master's wife, "Look, because my master has me, he doesn't know what's going on in his own house. He has put all his possessions into my charge. In this house, I am his equal. He hasn't withheld anything from me except yourself, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" But she kept pressing him day after day. Nevertheless, he didn't listen to her. He refused to sleep with her and even be alone with her. However, one day, when he went into the house to do his work and none of the men living in the house were indoors, she grabbed him by his robe, just like his brothers grabbed him by the robe, and said, "Sleep with me." But he fled, leaving his robe in her hand. And he got himself outside. When he saw that he left his robe in her hand and escaped, she called the men of her house and said to them, "Look at this, my husband brought in a Hebrew to make fools of us." The Egyptians, they hated Hebrews. "He came in and wanted to sleep with me, but I yelled out loudly. When he heard me yelling like that, he left his robe with me and ran out." She put the robe aside until his master came home. Then she said to him, "This Hebrew, this Ivri, the slave you brought into us, came in to make a fool of me. But when I yelled out, he left his robe with me and fled outside." When his master heard what his wife said as she showed him, she said, "Here's what your slave did to me." He became furious. Yosef's master took him and put him in prison, in the place where the king's prisoners were kept. And there he was in prison. How many years do you think he was in prison?
12, 40.
We're pushing 12 years he's in prison at this point. 10 to 12 years. I don't know, when I was growing up, or just in my mind, even the past few years, I always thought it was like just a matter of a couple months. 10 to 12 years in prison for this offense that he did not even perform, that he did not commit. But Adonai was with Yosef, showing him grace and giving him favor in the sight of all the prison wardens. The prison warden made Yosef supervisor of all the prisoners in the prison, so that whatever they did there, he was in charge of it. The prison warden paid no attention to anything Yosef did, because Adonai was with him, and whatever he did, Adonai prospered. Now, guys, if you're working for somebody, especially young people in the room, if you're working, be a Yosef. Be someone that is indispensable to your employer, so that they will just be like, "You know what? You're in charge here. You're doing an amazing job. I'm just going to leave you alone and let you do your job. You are prospering my business." You need to be someone that for your employer. Be someone like
the Lord,
because
as he's your boss.
Absolutely. And if you don't work your hardest while you're on the clock, whether that be at Chick-fil-A or that be at real-time IT or whatever the case may be, if you're not working your hardest and doing it as a form of worship, you are stealing from your employer. And you're stealing from God's glory, because they know a lot about you. That employer knows that you attend this congregation and you are part of this congregation. They probably know your parents. They know a lot about you. Be a Yosef in your workplace and make yourself indispensable to them, so that when you get ready to leave, I like Alexis's story. When she was getting ready to leave UPS, they were like, no, here's a new position. Here's a raise. Here's this. We're going to make you a supervisor. Be an Alexis. Be someone when you say, "I've got to go." I have a new job offer or something like that. Your boss just throws everything at you to try to keep you. We need to be people like that work really hard, right? So Genesis 41:46, we learned that Yosef was 30 when he was made overseer. So he spent around 10 years in prison. Just like I said, we can kind of backdate it a little bit. But he spent anywhere between 10 to 12 years in prison. So what is this katonet pasim? The Midrash, it states that Yaakov told Yosef that he assigned him as the firstborn and gave him the special garments that God made for Adam, which had been passed to Nimrod, to Avraham, Yitzchak, Esav, and Yaakov. It is understood that this katonet pasim is a priestly garment and is viewed as a way of designating Yosef as the firstborn. A speaker of modern Hebrew who reads katonet pasim, they would translate katonet as a type of robe or gown that goes all the way to your arms or like the palm of your hand. Pasim, in Rabbinic Hebrew and Aramaic, the singular pas, it means to stripe. Who else was given a stripe? Romans 8:29 says, "For those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, so that he would be the firstborn among many brothers." You see Paul's riffing on that a little bit. About this in Colossians 1:15, he's doing the same thing. The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation.
Yeshua had a special coat too.
Yeah, he did.
Rolled dice and tried to get it.
They did. And some sages actually say that when the brothers got together with the katonet pasim and they soaked it in blood, the sages say that they actually began casting lots to decide who has to take this to the Father.
Wow.
Yeah. Matthew 3:16. As soon as Yeshua was immersed, he went up out of the water. Suddenly, the heavens were open, and he saw the Spirit of God descending on him like a dove and resting on him, like a katonet pasim, right? And a voice from heaven said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." Do you see the parallels developing there? So we have a priestly garment, a garment of favor, a garment of being the firstborn. Hebrews 4:15, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weakness, but we have one who has been tempted, just like Yosef, in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need." Do you see the parallels that Paul, or the writer of Hebrews, is working on there?
Well, you know, when he left his garment with her like that,
yeah,
there's also a lesson there that a young person being tempted like that kind of temptation, run the other way.
Yeah.
Don't
negotiate it with it.
Any thoughts. Don't negotiate. Run the other direction.
Yeah.
Get out of there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Immediately.
Yeah. I'm not going to go into it too much today, but why the story of Judah and Tamar? So if you guys look at your Bibles, we have Genesis 37. It's Yosef being betrayed by his own brothers. And then it goes to chapter 38, and there seems to be this random placement of the story of Judah, the firstborn, falling for temptation and sleeping with a prostitute who ended up being his own daughter-in-law.
And his 2 sons were killed because of his sin.
Yeah. Why is the story smack dab in the middle of that?
It's a weird one.
It is a weird one.
Well, it goes along with it. He's Joseph's brother that betrayed him.
Yeah.
I mean, God's punishing him.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. It's like this is a divine punishment because you kind of led this betrayal of your brother.
Well, Judah, though, by withholding his sons, even though that wasn't the right thing or the honorable thing to do, he's trying to protect them.
Yeah.
He really is trying to protect them. So,
yeah.
But
he's in like self-preservation or
mode.
Yeah.
He knows he messed up.
Yeah. Jose.
Torah's not written yet here we have the Kinsman Redeemer story being filed.
Yes.
Yeah, we have Levirate marriage already in place and expected, even though the Sinai experience has not happened. Yeah, it's a good observation. Yeah. Any other observations? Why is the story in the middle? If you think about Genesis 37 and the story of Yosef and then the story of Judah and Tamar, I want you to switch your paradigm a little bit. I want you to think of Judah as being the main character of both of those little stories.
Okay.
And these stories being written to expose the character and the state of the character of Judah at this point. We think Joseph is the main character in Genesis 37. But I would argue that Judah is the main character of both of these stories.
God's really working.
And when you look at it, you see, wow, Judah is really messed up. He's really got some serious character flaws here. Mm-hmm. And then he goes in and he sleeps with a prostitute, not realizing, it's like he has to come to terms. But what he's doing is a little bit of character development within Judah. He's character development within the story. Because we see at the end, I think we're going to see it in next week's Torah portion, Judah finally comes to a place of repentance in front of Yosef.
Right.
Remember that? Remember that part? We're going to talk about it next week. But that character, we begin to see, and he's exposed a little bit about his true character. The heart of Judah is so wicked at this point. And it's so sad. But I think if we look at those stories, they're a little bit more seamless that way. But we're not going to go into it too much right now. Other than there's deception going around. It seems like this family so far has a way of kind of being a little bit deceptive and using garments to be deceptive, using articles of clothing to show their deceptiveness some ways. It's fascinating. But what this does, by Judah is inadvertently preserving his whole family by selling Yosef into Egypt. He doesn't realize what he's even doing. If you think about that, he sells Yosef to Egypt. Yosef has a dream, starts saving up grain, and becomes the savior of the world. And then Judah's family, all of his family, goes to that salvation.
Right.
So he's preserved the family of Israel by doing that, by that betrayal. So he's kind of killed two birds with one stone. He's saved the entire world. He's made Joseph the living bread, the bread of life. And then he's also preserved his own family. And we see that kind of developing on the grand scheme, the political landscape right now, that God has preserved a remnant of the people of Israel, but then Jesus of Nazareth has become the Savior of the world, the bread of life, and the King of the known Gentile world. And those people are reading their Bibles, especially in things like evangelical Christianity. They're reading their Bibles and they're developing a zeal for the people of Israel.
Yes.
There's a fascinating book called A Match Made in Heaven. I forget who the author is, but he's a non-Yeshua following Jew, but he sees this current happening within evangelical Christianity. It says, well, these guys are our best allies.
Yep.
These guys who are writing these books about Israel, and they're just like mainstream Christians, but gosh, they have a love for Israel. They're one of our best allies. But we see that same relationship happening. And then eventually, we'll see in the rest of the story how Yehuda's brothers, or Yeshua's brothers, will come seeking bread, seeking nourishment, seeking truth, and they'll come and prostrate themselves. Like it says in Romans, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Yeshua is Lord. Now, I think that's how we're supposed to look at it. So one of the sages I thought was really interesting. He says this. He says, by selling Yosef into Egypt, Judah has preserved Mashiach ben Yosef. By sleeping with Tamar, he has preserved the legacy of Mashiach ben David. It's interesting. Think about that. Because we're talking about the two messiahs here.
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah. By selling Yosef to Egypt, he's preserved the line of Mashiach ben Yosef, the suffering servant. Mm-hmm. By sleeping with Tamar, he's preserved the line of Mashiach ben David without even knowing it. He's not aware of the bigger plan. He's not aware of the schemes of God.
So this is almost like Judas, where
yes.
Where he doesn't know his own destiny, but God has put him in, and even though he sins, it's still
yes.
beyond him.
Judas,
Judas the same thing, where Judas is like, this is an unspeakable thing that he's done, but because he's done that,
it was part of the plan altogether. Right. Yeah, and Judas's name was Yehuda, named after Judah, and without even knowing it, he's fulfilling this obligation of Yeshua of Nazareth being betrayed and sold into the known Gentile world. And for silver as well. I don't want to. But what I wanted to do, let's, instead of doing this for the sake of time, you guys talk to me. I wanted to write down some parallels. Now, I believe that Yosef is one of the most detailed types of Messiah.
Yes.
And let me go a couple slides over here and see if I put it in there. No, I didn't put it in there. Okay, that's okay. In some sects of Judaism, it's believed that there would be two. I think I did make a slide for it. Yeah, we can understand that ultimately from these two episodes, Judah and Joseph, and then Judah and Tamar, emerged the two redeemers of Israel, Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David. There is a tradition among Jewish thinkers that there will be two stages to the messianic redemption involving the advent of two messianic figures, Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David. Mashiach ben Yosef is described as a warrior who will effect the national reunification, the gathering in of the sheep, right, of the Jewish people prior to the arrival of Mashiach ben David. I thought that's interesting. So I was on a plane with two Hasidic men from Jerusalem, Moshe and Yehuda, oddly enough, from Jerusalem, and I was beginning to talk to them about these two stages of messianic redemption, and they were surprised that I knew about that. They were a little bit shocked, and they were a little bit apprehensive about talking to me about it.
They don't really want you to talk about that because that's been squelched.
Yeah, well, the reason why that exists, these two messianic figures exist, is because you read Isaiah 53 about a suffering Messiah, but then you read other prophetic passages about a conquering king. It's like, well, which is he? Is he going to come as a king? Is he going to come as a suffering, lowly servant on a donkey? Which is it? And so that's one way they kind of use to reconcile all these different seemingly contradictory passages about the coming Messiah. Is that there would be one that's like Yosef, and there would be one that's like David. But let's talk about some parallels. Let's take about 5 minutes and talk about some parallels that you guys have seen so far with the story of Yosef and the story of Yeshua. Somebody tell me one.
Rejected by his family.
Okay, so betrayed by his own, betrayed.
Resisting sin and temptation.
Resisted temptation.
I'm pretty sure that after Yosef was thrown into the well, the brothers started gambling over his robe.
Yeah.
It's like how they gambled over Yeshua's robe after he was thrown in the well.
We'll put a question mark because that's rabbinic.
Right.
Given stripes, let's say that. Given stripes.
Sold for 20 pieces of silver, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the numbers don't match up,
No.
but it's still betrayed for silver.
Yeshua was 30 pieces.
Oh, yeah, it was 40, wasn't it?
30.
30. Inflation.
Yeah, inflation, yeah.
Both were falsely accused.
Falsely accused, yeah.
Giving glory among the Gentiles.
Accused. Glorified. Among Gentiles.
Both brought salvation to their people.
Yeah. Salvation.
Both had dreams that were mocked. In the sense that Joseph told his brothers about becoming a king and all that, and then they sold him into slavery. Yeshua knew and spoke of the coming of the kingdom, and a lot of people mocked him for that.
Yeah.
They called him King of the Jews, but they were mocking him when they were doing it.
Yeah, I mean, he stands before Pontius Pilate, and he says, "Are you the king of the Jews?" He's like, "Those are your words, not mine." So yeah.
It's funny. This wasn't initially part of my question the other day that I asked you, but it kind of is now. That Joseph does not try to self-interpret his dreams. It's all we talk
It's all about the Lord.
interpretation of dreams.
Yeah.
That it's about his brothers and his family kind of
How would we
Gives
say that?
credit
prejudging
to
and
God.
assuming that he's
Avoids. Say avoids.
Edification.
Edification. Yeah. What about this? Did any of them have a name change? Did Yeshua have a name change?
Yeah.
They were both rejected.
Yeah, we got that, betrayed by brothers.
Well, as we get into next week's part of the unrecognizable by
Yeah.
the brothers.
Unrecognized, yes.
Became unrecognizable.
To his brothers.
Yep.
So both. By brothers.
And Zophnathanaia, they think, means giver of bread. Yes?
I just have a quick comment on something that we noticed yesterday. When Joseph had the first two dreams, he told his dad and his brothers, I had these dreams. Then when he goes to jail and he interprets the dreams of the two guys who were in jail with him, he say, okay, I will interpret, and then he tell them the interpretation. But when he goes before the Pharaoh, he say the Lord will give the interpretation. So I guess after all of those years that he was in jail and he kind of
matured a little bit. Yeah.
Not so cocky.
Yeah. He learned tact. He had wisdom in age. Yeah.
I learned this from you today.
What's that?
Yosef and of course Yeshua went after the lost sheep.
Yeah.
oh yeah,
Went after the lost sheep.
I've come not but for the lost sheep of the house of Israel, right?
Yeah, that was good. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry.
That they both got gifts and that back people gave them hatred. So Joseph got
Yeah, let's talk about like
and he got
objects of jealousy.
Yes, and scorn and mocking.
They both redeemed Israel.
Yeah, they both saved. Yeah, they both. Both are sources.
Salvation.
Remember, Joseph died in Egypt, right? And what did he say? When was his last dying wishes? He said, "Bury me where? Bury me back in the land of my fathers," right? When you leave this place. Now, do you think the brothers... Now, Abraham was already given the prophecy about 400 years of bondage in a foreign land. Now, do you think that ever left their memory? Do you think that was always kind of playing in the back of their minds as all this is taking place? I don't think they did this knowing, okay, we're going to force God's hand or whatever. We're just going to speed this process along. But it's possible as they went and settled in the land, maybe some of them were thinking, okay, wait a second. That prophecy has not been fulfilled yet about 400 years living oppressed in a foreign land. But anyways, when they leave Egypt, what do they take with them? The bones of Joseph. So an empty tomb means liberty for the people. An empty tomb means salvation for the people. An exodus, right? Any other parallels?
That reminds me of when Yeshua was leaving and they're reburying the person's body. They said, we can't leave with you because we have to rebury the body.
Yeah.
And he said, let the dead bury the dead.
Yeah.
I wonder if that was in honor of Yosef, of them digging up his bones and then reburying him. I've heard it was a pagan tradition, but it's possible it was a Yosef tradition.
I'm not sure. I can't really say for sure.
I know we talked about it before at your mother's house, and one of the things was the fact that what he was coming against there was the fact that typically the people would take a whole year to do the burial and make all these preparations on all these elaborate schemes.
Yeah.
And he's saying, I don't have time for this. You need to come.
Or that
you need to go with me and do.
The man maybe had a terminal illness or something
right,
like that.
and hadn't even died yet.
Yeah.
Might still be another year.
It's possible. I don't know.
Both favorite sons.
Yes, both favored sons. Both were sent, right? Both were sent out, like John 3:16. He sent his only begotten son, right? John 4:34 is another one. He's obedient, yeah.
Well, kind of on that note too, in this, I mean, we've said a lot of things where they overlap, so this may have already been said, but they spoke on behalf of someone else, like higher, like a higher authority. So Joseph was there in place of Potiphar, and Yeshua spoke on behalf of him.
Very good.
Yeah, so...
spoke on behalf of higher authority.
So they provided direction to the people but with the authority that was placed upon them.
Yeah, that's good.
Submitting themselves to a higher authority.
Yeah, they were submissive. They were submissive. Yeah, and Yeshua says, "Not my will, but yours be done." Right? Yeshua has an
And that
air
I don't
of submission.
speak my own words, but I speak the words
Yeah,
of the
one who
Father.
sent me. Yeah, absolutely. There's many, many. Yeah, Andreas, I'm sorry.
They will start at like when they were 30 years.
Yeah, yeah.
That's right. I thought
30
that.
years.
Good, good.
In their 30s. All right. Which perhaps speaks of priesthood, right? Anything else? Okay. There's many, many more that we're not going to jump into today, but you guys can take a photo of this if you want and research more if you want. Let me go 2 Corinthians 12:9, kind of in closing, a couple more I want to go through. But he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in my weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weakness, in insults, in hardships, and persecutions, and difficulties. For when I'm weak, I'm strong." When we experience those things, hardships, insults, and persecutions, which we have, and we continue to do we look at the bigger picture like Vayeshev did? Do we look at it as an opportunity to allow God to receive glory through that, like Vayeshev did? Or do we feel sorry for ourselves like I do?
Neither one of them grumbled or complained.
No.
Neither one.
No complaints, yeah.
And in front of his captors, Yeshua didn't, he came and he was dumb.
Yeah.
As in not speaking. And we don't have any evidence of Vayeshev ever speaking or complaining or anything.
Yeah, they were both trusting that there was something bigger going on.
Exactly.
And he says that, and I think in next week's Torah portion, he says, "You meant this for evil, but God," and he uses the word, what is the word that he uses there? He uses the word to weave. But God meant this chashav. He chashaved it. He weaved it together for his good. So that he's calling God a weaver there. And taking all these different threads, all these different colors, and he's making this tapestry and saying, I know what the outcome of this will be. You don't, because you're just a thread, and your life is just one of these seemingly random colors, but I'm weaving it all together for my glory. Just trust me in this. But Philippians 2:9 says, "Therefore God exalted him," Yeshua, "to the highest place," just like Vayeshev, "and gave him the name above all names," just like Zaphnath Paneah, right? "That at the name of Yeshua every knee should bow, in heaven, on earth, and every tongue confess that Messiah Yeshua is Lord, to the glory of God the Father." So did we see the fulfillment of Vayeshev's dreams?
Yes.
Yes and no. We haven't seen the greater fulfillment of those dreams yet. But we will. And Paul realizes that as he's writing to the church in Philippi. He's saying every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. Just like the sheaves that bow down. They will. So here's kind of our question, our takeaway question for the day. Are we good at suffering for the sins and the injustices of other people, even if we don't get credit for that? Even if someone says, "Hey, Jordan, I saw how you kind of just let that roll off your back the other day. That's awesome that you did that." Even if we don't have that vindication, what do we do when we suffer for other people? Do we know that there's a bigger plan, that it's going to bring our Creator glory? Or do we seek out vindication and make it about us and try to steal His glory? I really firmly believe, and guys, I've been doing this for several years, I think 11 years or something, we've been in this messianic faith or whatever. And I can tell you, learning Hebrew or celebrating the holy days and knowing mysteries and this and that and prophecies and wearing tassels or whatever the case may be, all that's good and all that's special. But in our quest to become more like Yeshua of Nazareth, I will tell you there's nothing more that will make you feel closer to Him than taking sins and illnesses and grief from other human beings and saying, "I've got that." Taking it from them and feeling the weight of that. And feeling the crushing, overpowering grief that brings to you, but seeing the relief that it brings in them. Being their salvation and not getting any credit for it, not being vindicated. If you want to be like Messiah, that's where it's at. I'm not telling you to not do all those other things. I think those things are great and important. But I think the next level is being able to say, I see that you're hurting. I see that you're in a place of grief. And I'm going to just do the right thing, realizing I'm not going to get credit for it. And that's going to weigh heavy on me. I'm going to spend nights awake on your behalf, praying for you. And I'm going to wake up feeling like trash in the morning. But I cannot get you off of my mind, and I'm praying for you. And I'm interceding for you, because I know that you're going through a lot right now. If we can get to that place, I think that's the next level up of being Messiah-like. Do you all agree with that?
Yes.
And I think we do a good job at that. I think we do. And we put a higher emphasis on that kind of stuff than we do externalities or what have you. Yeshua says you should do both without neglecting the other. I think we should find that balance there and be people who bear each other's burdens. But
that's a part of discipleship that I don't think is very well taught. So many times we're taught get born again, and then all your problems are going to go away, and it's this fluff and puff and really nice, but not very realistic about what it really is to take up your cross and follow him. That part is not really.
We're looking for somebody to carry ours.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We're worried about somebody else.
All our needs are going to be met. Everything's going to be fine. It's all about me, instead of about him and the cross and laying down your life.
yeah. Well, I think there's a phase we all go through when we come into this walk. We taste meat for the first time in a long while, and then we just have a meat feast,
Right.
And we don't think about the person to our left and our right. We just have, bring me more steak.
Yeah. Learn.
Teach me more stuff.
Yeah.
Shove more meat in my face.
Yeah.
That's our kind of thought process. And I think the body of Messiah has to mature out of that, and the Messianic movement has to mature out of that to a certain extent. I think that's fine. That's great to be in a place of learning. That's important that we're being fed meat. But we got to make sure that the people to our left and our right are good, But I think we need to know how to suffer, and to suffer well, and to suffer well for other people. And that's a very big challenge.
It is.
Are there any other thoughts before we close in prayer? Any questions or anything? No. Everybody knows everything about Yosef?
Something to ponder is the mystery of the cell of Joseph. They were talking of the Ishmaelites, yet somewhere they heard of the Midianites there. So there's a lot undertone there. There's a lot more to be said.
Yeah.
It's non-biblical according to Genesis, but there's a lot of history
Yeah.
there.
Oh, you could spend years just on this one Torah portion. It's so fascinating.
Yes, it is very fascinating.
So much there. Let's close in prayer, and then we'll break for Kiddush and Oneg. Avinu Machenu, Father and our King. Father, help us to be people who can bear each other's grief, as illogical as it seems, Father. As dangerous as it seems, as our community grows and as the people and the network and different connections of people that we know continues to grow, sometimes it can seem so heavy, knowing that people around us are sick or in need of financial help or going through marital issues. And all of that can just weigh down on our shoulders, Father. But give us strength to stand firm and to carry those burdens for other people. And to be little Yeshuas who don't seek vindication, who don't seek praise or glory, but deflect it all back to you. Father, help us to forgive people when they do us wrong and they betray us. Help us to be people who cry out and intercede for their salvation Father, guide our congregation. Use us as you would see fit. Open doors and opportunities where we can bring you glory. Teach us to love what you love and to hate what you hate. And it's in the mighty name of Yeshua, the Prince of Peace, our Sar Shalom. We all say,
Amen.
Amen. Let's do Kiddush. Oh, yeah.